with several active in the community while infectious. Restrictions tighten further for Greater Sydney residents as the Premier delivers a stark warning.
Unless there is a dramatic change, unless there's a dramatic turnaround in the numbers, I can't see how we'd be in a position to ease restrictions by next Friday.
South Australia to pilot a home quarantine program for Australian travellers who have been fully vaccinated. And Ash Barty becomes the first Australian woman in more than 40 years to make it to the final at Wimbledon. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Kirsten Aiken. The New South Wales Premier has foreshadowed Greater Sydney's lockdown will extend beyond next Friday, with a number of new restrictions in place from today. Gladys Berejiklian says unless there is a dramatic drop in the number of people infectious in the community, stay-at-home orders will continue. The number of cases rose again today, 44 locally acquired infections, a record in this outbreak. Alarmingly, only 10 of those had been in isolation for their entire infectious period. At least 27 cases spent some time in the community while infectious, and the isolation status of another 7 cases are under investigation. That means up to 34 of today's cases were infectious in the community. It's prompted the state government to tighten restrictions. From now, outdoor public gatherings are limited to 2 people, excluding members of the same household. People must stay in their local government area or within 10 kilometres of home for exercise, with no carpooling between non-household members. Browsing in shops is banned, plus only 1 person per household per day can leave the home for shopping. And from Sunday, funerals will be limited to 10 people. Some other figures today: 43 people are currently in hospital with COVID. 10 of them are in intensive care, and of those, 1 person in their 20s. The number of close contacts in the state has doubled overnight from 7,000 to 14,000. Health authorities have also listed a number of Sydney suburbs of concern where COVID cases are emerging. They include Sutherland, Kareela, Sylvania, Hurstville and Maroubra in the southeast. And in the southwest, there's quite a list: Narellan Vale, Bosley Park, Smithfield, Fairfield, Glenfield, West Hoxton, Bass Hill, Greenacre, St John's Park, Bonnyrigg Heights, Panania, Bankstown, Canley Vale, Carramar, Casula, Chester Hill, Edensaw Park, Greenfield Park, Moorebank and St John's Park. Let's go now to our reporter Mark Reddy, who is in Liverpool in Sydney's southwest for us this afternoon. Mark, talk us through the reasons for the new restrictions a little further.
Well, Kirsten, to put it simply, the Premier Gladys Berejiklian wants everyone to be shocked, and given those figures, a record number, 44 cases, there's no doubt that this is starting to sink into the community here in Sydney's southwest. As you say, 34 were infectious while in the community, 7,000 are close contacts yesterday, and that number has now skyrocketed to 14,000. We are getting some very concerning numbers out of our hospitals. We know that 40 people are now in hospital. 11 of them are intensive care. That's an increase of 4 overnight. 17 people who are in hospital are now under the age of 55. 1 of them is in their 30s. 10 people in hospital are under the age of 35. 3 people are on ventilators. These are very concerning numbers. We know the Delta strain is highly contagious, and now these restrictions are enforced from now. So really what the message is, the Premier doesn't want people gathering in large numbers. So that's why there are now restrictions on shopping. So you can only go out once a day, 1 person per household. In terms of the essential reason of exercise, 2 people outside at a time. And in areas like here in Liverpool, there are a lot of multicultural families, large families, and the message to them is that you must stay in your household. You can't go visit anywhere else. Now, these numbers are incredibly concerning. There is a fear that they could skyrocket given those high number of close contacts and infectious people in the community. Let's take a listen to what Gladys Berejiklian had to say.
New South Wales, and in fact no state or nation or any country on the planet, can live with the Delta variant when our vaccination rates are so low. So please do not think that the New South Wales government thinks we can live with this when our rate of vaccination is only at 9%. Because if we chose to live with this while the rates of vaccination is at 9%, we will see thousands and thousands of hospitalisations and death.
Mark, what have police had to say about the compliance operation, which has been underway since 7 a.m. in Sydney southwest?
Well, Kirsten, that operation is ongoing, but police I have spoken to on the front line say they are extremely pleased with how the community has responded to these health orders here in Sydney southwest. If you just take a look at where I am, this is a main shopping drag here in Liverpool and it's extremely empty. There's no one around. I went into Westfield, Liverpool today and it was like a ghost town. There were more police inside than there were shoppers. So it looks like people are starting to stay home and abide by the rules. There were a few incidents, including a 20-year-old man at Roseland Shopping Centre yesterday. He was wearing his mask below his nose and police went over and said, could you pull it up? Because that's how we know a mask should be worn. And then he is now accused of spitting at officers. He was charged for breaching the public health orders, but there really have been only very few minor incidents today. We did see a large number of police, more than 100 extra officers on horseback, but also on foot, checking that businesses had their QR codes in place and that people were doing the right thing. Let's take a listen now to the Deputy Police Commissioner, Gary Warboys.
We know it is a very difficult time, but the issuing of a notice or getting in a confrontation with police is the very last thing that we want. We want people to take the responsibility, share the responsibility, and what we know is that at this moment it is a crucial time for the community, the police and health to work together.
And so, Mark, does it seem as though most people are happy to do that, to comply with the public health orders and work with police?
Yeah, it certainly does. And one of the successes of today's operation has been the fact that police have actually enlisted translators and multicultural liaisons to hand out pamphlets in different languages to make sure they are aware of all these new restrictions which are now enforced from 5 p.m. There has been, though, a mixed response from residents in Fairfield and Liverpool. We know that people we spoke to understood that police had to carry out their job, but they said that they felt that they were unfairly targeted. I guess yesterday we saw that huge media conference about this operation, and a lot of people have said, well, why didn't we see that when the Bondi outbreak happened, where we know this is where the outbreak began? But police say that this operation is comparable to the Northern Beaches one, where we saw a major outbreak last year. Kirsten, as you say in the introduction, the case numbers have now spread down to Sydney's south, and police sources I have spoken to say they are considering an operation like this in other areas if we do continue to see case numbers spike. Let's take a listen to what some residents had to say.
This is only because we are a migrant here. Majority of the people live here are migrant. I mean, I'm an Australian, I'm proud to be Australian, but I see it as discriminating against us. Why this has not happened in the eastern suburb?
Some of them, they are against with it. They say, oh, I don't believe it, I don't care. But to me, I just listen to the police, whatever they say, just follow the rules.
You can see streets are clear. No cars on the road, so people are quite good for them.
So, Kirsten, the message from the Premier is if we want this lockdown to end next Friday, which is looking like it may keep going, then the real thing, what people have to do is simply stay home and only come out if it's for those essential reasons like exercise, a medical appointment or an essential shop.
Reddy reporting live from Sydney's Liverpool. And as Sydney's COVID-19 outbreak continues to grow, so too does the number of people requiring hospitalisation. 43 people are now in hospital with COVID. 10 of them are in intensive care. Dr George Zoe is an intensive care specialist at Westmead Hospital in the Western Sydney Local Health District. He treated the first person in the state to be hospitalised with COVID-19 last year. And Dr Zoe joins me now. Good afternoon and welcome to you.
Hi. Thanks.
It's terrific to be able to get your perspective on this. You've had much more experience of COVID than most Australians. Can you start off by telling us how many patients you have there at Westmead at the moment?
As you've heard, there's over 40 patients in New South Wales. Currently, we have a dedicated ward for COVID patients, but we don't have any patients in intensive care now, which is very lucky.
Okay. Clearly it is awful for the patients who themselves are in hospital and experiencing severe symptoms from COVID, but just tell us or give us an idea of what it's been like for you and your teams while you've been treating patients throughout the pandemic to date.
So it's been a test of teamwork, and it has been long days and stressful days covering for each other. At the pandemic last year, we had lots of unknowns that we had to deal with, but this year we're much more prepared, and even in the last few months and weeks, we've been definitely very ready, prepared for any surge in cases.
Are you waiting for those daily figures each day like the rest of us, particularly interested in the number of people who have been out in the community while infectious?
It doesn't particularly affect our work every day, but we are aware of what numbers are coming in, as we need to have the beds and the equipment available. But as I said before, we are all very prepared for any surge in cases, and especially now that staff are vaccinated, we have better personal protective equipment protocols and a better idea of how to treat these patients compared to last year. I think, we are ready.
So you're ready, but are you concerned given that the outbreak is heading in the wrong direction at the moment?
We are concerned about the numbers, and the numbers do keep on rising. I think this is not a time to be complacent. We know that this disease affects people of all ages and even patients without, significant medical problems. So we are definitely concerned, yes.
The Chief Health Officer in New South Wales, Kerry Chatt, has been emphasising with each passing day the ages of the younger patients in intensive care. Do you think people in the wider community would be taken aback if they could actually see what was going on inside your hospital ward?
I think so. This is a very deadly virus, and patients who come into intensive care have significant complications and a long road to recovery. From both experience in Australia and in overseas looking after COVID patients, it can affect patients of any age, even younger patients. And even now, as you said earlier, we have a patient in the 20s and a patient in the 30s on ventilators. But I think people would be shocked in the community to know how serious this disease is.
The state government seems frustrated that there are people who haven't been following the public health orders for the first 2 weeks of this lockdown. Do you have a message for them, perhaps something to illustrate why indeed they need to take this seriously and just stay at home if they do not have an essential reason to leave their household?
I think based on our experience here and across Australia and overseas, we know this is a very deadly virus, and thankfully the patients that we have treated, a lot of them have made it home, but they have long problems with breathing, significant fatigue and some disability, so it is very serious. Our message to everyone would be this is not a time to be complacent. The goal is to have everyone vaccinated, and while we do that, then everyone should stay at home and not be out and about trying to contract the virus.
The Prime Minister this afternoon spoke about how health preparedness across the nation is being reviewed and assessed every week, and that at the moment New South Wales is in a really good position to deal with the current outbreak. Do you worry, though, that what we've seen happen in hospitals overseas could indeed happen here?
I think based on our experience for preparing for outbreaks last year, and given the time to prepare up until now, we are more than prepared for at least whatever numbers come in, and a surge as well, both in terms of staff readiness, vaccinations with our staff, and both equipment and medications. We know a lot more about the disease now, but we have prepared for whatever we expect to come and more.
Now, just finally, we did learn of an incident at a Queensland hospital earlier this week where 10 health workers did have to isolate after rushing to assist a COVID-positive patient suffering a life-threatening condition. Just wondering if you and your team have had the chance to reflect on what happened there. And I'm also wondering if anything similar has happened to your knowledge in Sydney hospitals.
So we haven't had anything happen locally recently, but based on personal experiences, am sympathetic for those who rush to these emergencies. They can happen at any time. It's a very deadly virus, and complications can happen at any time, and there are still a few unknowns. So we do sympathise with them, and luckily we haven't had any incidents yet this year.
Dr. George Zoe at Westmead Hospital, it's been terrific to speak to you. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us, and all the best throughout this outbreak.
Thank you very much.
Well, quarantining at home could soon become an option, with plans now underway to set up a pilot program. South Australia has agreed to run the first trial, which would allow some Australians returning from overseas to complete 14 days at home instead of in a hotel. And anyone flying into the country will soon be required to provide information about whether or not they've been vaccinated. Political reporter Stephanie Boris joins us now from Parliament House in Canberra. Good afternoon to you. We've been talking about this idea of home quarantine for some time now, but it does look like it is getting a bit closer to reality.
Yeah, we're moving from the discussion stage to the actual planning stage, which I'm sure is very exciting for many Australians that either want to come home or go overseas and be able to easily pop back